Clinical Pastoral Education, CPE, brings together theological students and clergy of all faiths, pastors, priests, rabbis, imams, and others, into supervised encounter with persons in crisis to learn how to minister to those persons in crisis. Bowen Theory postulates that the family is an emotional unit that regulates development and behavior of its members. I talked with the Reverend Robert Spilman, a certified clinical pastoral education supervisor, about CPE and how the Bowen Theory helps him understand the functioning of families and congregations. One of the great things about doing Kaleidoscope during the summer months is we can do some interviews that are not time specific.
Okay.
In that vein, we're really honored to have with us Reverend Robert Spilman, clinical pastoral education expert and certified, and many other interesting things, a noted person in the Bowen Theory. So we want to talk a little bit about your life, about your denomination, more Missouri Synod Lutheran, about CPE, what is it, and what congregations ought to know if their pastors are involved in that, but also about Bowman family systems theory and what they teach us about what goes on in congregations, but also what's happening in our nation at this point, how they can be helpful. So, welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Where are you native from? Where did you come from?
Originally from Long Island, Queens, part of New York City, so I'm a downstate guy. Been here in Buffalo for 30 years. Now I'm an upstate guy. This is a wonderful community.
This is now your native home.
That is correct.
Where it's been.
Yeah.
So you've been involved here since you've been here all the time. You've been Missouri Synod Lutheran.
That's right. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Missouri Synod Lutherans.
The Lutheran Church Missouri Synod is one of the two largest groups in the United States that comprise Lutheranism, the other being the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Of the two, I would say that the Missouri Synod is more conservative. By that I mean they really hold very strongly to interpretation of Scripture and focusing on what is, I think, at the core of the Christian faith. A little bit less in tune with perhaps cultural trends, let's say, that might be a way to put it. That goes way back into our history. Very strongly focused on the three pieces in our motto. Faith alone, grace alone, Scripture alone. That said,
Martin Luther.
From Martin Luther, that's right, from way back. 500 years ago this year was the year when he posted his, what are called the 95 Theses or statements on the door of the church in Wittenberg, Germany. And from that spawned the, not just the Lutheran, but the Protestant Reformation.
Now, what led you to CPE, or Clinical Pastoral Education, that now for a number of years, you've been running the programs?
That's right. I'm what's called a Clinical Pastoral Education Supervisor, CPE for short. A number of organizations that accredit persons to do this, and the group that I'm a part of is the largest. It's called the Association for Clinical Pastoral Education. I was in North Carolina in my first church. After about 5 or 6 years, I felt that I was a jack of all trades and a master of none. And I had the sense that I wanted to focus and specialize in an area. And for me, that was pastoral care, really relating to people in the depths of the struggles of their lives. Fast forwarding, what I've learned over the years is that what you can learn in relating to people is really applicable to all the things that we do, primarily leadership in whatever organization you're a part of. So what I did was go to a hospital program that ran a clinical pastoral education program and enrolled there, and the rest is, as they say, history. I spent time there, became certified, and then moved to Western New York to start a program that was advertised at an agency in Williamsville called the Lutheran Service Society that wanted to run a program not out of a hospital, which is the traditional CPE setting, training chaplains and pastors in intensive ministry with people, but rather work with clergy and congregations. So I worked out of that agency for 15 years.
Well, talk to us a little bit about clinical pastoral education, because members of congregations, houses of worship may have their own religious leader going through the training.
That's right.
And they'll say, what is that? Why do they want some time and some intensive time? And when they go through it, it's sometimes a little, a bit of a struggle, a challenge.
And I think that's the case because you are expected to reflect on your part in the interaction with another person. So it's self-awareness. Rather than focusing on what the problem is out there, it's looking at one's interaction with the problem out there. And it's sometimes difficult to say, oh, this is my part in this. It's owning that up. Don't look at the problem, the log in somebody else's eye, or the beam, the mote in somebody else's eye, the small thing, the speck, but the beam in one's own eye. That's what I think makes it a challenging process, but very fulfilling and rewarding. So CPE is what's called, in any setting wherever it is done, is called an action, reflection, and action model of learning.
Now, when I went through a couple turns of CPE,
right.
They were both in hospital settings,
right.
Very different, one a mental hospital and the other inner city hospital, Boston, and Danvers State Hospital, which is no longer there.
Right.
However, what we did is, of course, we served as a chaplain there, right. And then we had to write verbatims.
Yes.
That's a reflection on all that happened. And then we were also have small group sessions. Now, is yours different than that since it's congregationally based?
All of that is a part of the process. So there's a general methodology that involves bringing in case material through a verbatim, a reconstruction of an actual conversation to the best of your ability to remember it, and then having a small group process of peers under supervision, reflecting with you on that, asking you questions about it so that you can kind of broaden your scope and see, how did I function in this? What could I learn? How could I do it better?
Well, and normally, they go in I've forgotten what you call it, but normally about 3 months or
That's right.
one unit.
That's right.
And
one
you can
unit.
have multiple units. I know I had 2, but
Yes.
many. When you've taken 4, you move to a different level. Is that correct?
Yes, if you have 4 units of CP and you successfully completed them, which would take at least a year, possibly longer. Some of the units are extended over longer periods of time. Then you could qualify to be certified as a chaplain, a specialized minister. For example, at Sisters of Charity Hospital here in Buffalo, my program is a satellite. I operate out of a counseling center, Samaritan Counseling Center in North Tonawanda, but we're accredited through the Sisters program. They have chaplains, persons in ministry who take multiple units or classes of CPE, and after 4, if they're successful in doing the work, they can be certified as chaplains. And then they can get positions in not only that, the Catholic health system, but wherever they might want to go.
Well, one of the things we wanted to talk about here is the Bowen family systems theory. That's a lot to say to us, I think. And you're kind of a follower of Bowen theory and somewhat of an expert. What is it, and what does it have to do with families and houses of worship?
I came across this through the work of Rabbi Edwin Friedman, in the mid-'80s actually, when he wrote a book called Generation to Generation, Family Process in Church and Synagogues. And he was a student of what's called Bowen family systems theory. Dr. Murray Bowen studied families. And I guess I would say the most fundamental concept is that if you want to understand what people are dealing with, the problems that they experience, you have to look at the family unit of which they're a part. And that we tend to, when we get uptight, get anxious, stressed, we tend to fail to look around the problem. Rather, we look just at it and we micromanage it. But if you step back from the problem, this affects leadership. Stepping back from the problem and observe what's going on around it, you'll see that everything contributes to the development of a symptom or a problem.
So
it's really fascinating stuff.
It's not taking and working with individual therapy with one person, but understanding whatever you do with that person begins to affect the whole family or community.
Right.
Every single part?
I think that's true, absolutely. Usually problems or stress, it could be called anxiety, tension, usually comes to rest in only one part of an emotional unit. By emotional, I mean kind of a group that's very deeply connected, like a family. That's the best example. But it could be any other institution, could be a political party, certainly a congregation. And so if you're working with a person who is in stress in an institution, especially in a family, you might be able to help them to think more broadly and not see that either they are the problem, it's only in them, or the other person or persons are the problem, but it's the interaction between the two. If they can get a hold of that, it opens up possibilities for calming oneself down and maybe even finding some new ways to function a little less anxiously. That's a broad way to put it, I think.
I think Bowen suggests that this gets passed on from parents to children.
Absolutely.
And across generations.
Right.
And which may be the same for congregations. There's some congregations that keep
Oh, yes.
going through struggles year after year when they get different leadership and it repeats.
It's amazing how when you step back you can see repetitive behavior over time. It's like we with our spouses entering the same process of intense interaction and we do it again and again. So I've been here before. This sounds familiar. What could interrupt that? And I think that happens in all institutions.
Well, in about the last 30 seconds,
Yeah.
nothing like doing this, but we're really in the midst of our United States and the nation, a lot of internal conflict. Does the Bowen theory have anything to say to that, do you think?
That's a big one. Murray Bowen developed 8 concepts in the theory. When he died in 1990, and people continue to work on this. The 8th concept is called societal emotional process, and he coined the phrase societal regression, that societies go through periods of progression and regression. And he identified, his view was that starting in the 60s, we entered a period of regression. And what happens is people get more intense with each other, they think less and react more. So you get more feeling focus and less clear-headedness. So yeah, I think what you see, and you can see it, it's not connected any particular viewpoint.
Well, thank you so much,
Wow.
Reverend Robert Spilman, Bob Spilman, as I've known you.
Yes.
And thanks for joining us in this summer discussion.
Stan, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.